snowing again. Not heavy, just light powder drifting down through the trees and layering over the hard crust already blanketing the ridge. Barely enough to hear it fall, but enough to blur the edges of everything. I've been up here for 30 days now, could be 31. I stopped marking the wall after the calendar got wet and the pen started freezing between lines. Doesn't really matter anymore. Days don't feel different unless something tries to hit you. My name's Evan Kessler. Before this, I did maintenance at Ridgeline Peak, cable tension checks, tower alignments, snowcat repairs, the kind of work nobody notices unless it stops getting done. I've spent the last 12 winters crawling around steel beams with frozen fingers and bad coffee in my thermos. I wasn't supposed to be here this long. Season ended. I was going to help shut things down, maybe bum a ride down the valley. That didn't happen. It hit hard and fast. I was in the lift bay shop, patching a cracked snowmobile frame, when every screen in the building lit up with the same alert. Bright red, loud, intrusive. Shelter in place, viral outbreak detected, CDC protocols active. They called it a flu for the first 2 hours. Then it turned into some kind of neurological virus. Then the message changed completely. No diagnosis, no cure, just a single instruction: get away from cities. Well, I was already away, 2 hours from the closest town by road, snowed in on 3 sides. It didn't feel real at first. I figured I'd ride it out for a few days, maybe a week, watch the news, drink the rest of the beer in the staff fridge, charge my phone and wait for things to calm down. But the news went quiet after 2 days. My phone died on day 4 and never came back online. The hand crank radio picked up static. Emergency broadcast dropped to fragments. I tried the depot radio, the repeater on the main ridge, everything. No response. The guy who ran the supply depot, Mitch, he packed a bag, fired up the snowcat, and said he was heading down to check on his wife. That was 26 days ago. He never came back. I started scavenging once I ran low on food. The mountain has scattered buildings, cabins, rental lodges, ski patrol sheds, old gear stations. I hit the closest ones first. Most were empty. The ones that weren't, I learned how to approach them with a crowbar in one hand and a flashlight in the other. You knock first, then wait, then you move slow. The infected up here are slow. The cold locks up their joints, stiffens their movements. Some crawl, some just freeze in place and wait, eyes half fogged, teeth clacking when they see heat or hear noise. But they're still dangerous. You let your guard down for 5 seconds, and they'll tear through whatever muscle they have left trying to reach you. I haven't seen another living person in 3.5 weeks. Haven't heard a voice that wasn't coming from a broken radio or an echo in my head. Nights are the worst. You lie awake listening to every creak in the walls, trying to tell the difference between wind, rats, or something else dragging across the snow outside. It's too quiet. You notice everything when it's quiet for that long. Today, I broke into the maintenance annex near the north slope. It's an old utility shed tucked behind the snowmaker pumps. I hadn't checked it yet because I figured there was nothing but spare nozzles and pipe flanges inside. I needed copper wire and lamp oil, and I thought maybe I'd find something useful to trade if I ran into anyone else still alive. I cracked open the door with a shovel. It was iced shut. Inside, half the roof had collapsed, but the floor was intact. There was a man-sized hatch behind the compressor tanks. It was flush with the floor and sealed with a digital keypad. Black metal, recessed hinges. It didn't match the rest of the room, which was all rusted aluminum and chipped paint. This hatch was new. It looked expensive. The kind of thing you see in military bunkers or high-security vaults. I stood there for 10 minutes just staring at it. I don't know why. Maybe I was too tired to get curious. Maybe I was scared someone was already inside. The keypad was still powered. I pressed the green button and it blinked red. I tried 0000 just to see what would happen. Red again. No sound. No alarm. Just a locked door and a soft hum beneath my boots. That was the first time in weeks I heard powered machinery running anywhere on the mountain. Whatever was under that hatch still had juice. I sat down on a broken workbench and ate half a granola bar while I thought. If it was what I suspected, then someone with a lot of money and serious paranoia had prepped this place years before the world ended. Maybe some tech executive. Maybe one of the real estate tycoons that skied here and talked about bug-out zones. Whoever it was, they built something under the mountain, and either they never made it in time, or they were still down there. I went back the next day with tools. Battery drill, pry bar, some rusted lockpicks I barely knew how to use. Took me 2 hours and a bent screw extractor to pull the keypad casing. The cable bundle inside was thick, armored, shielded. Not something you could just clip and bypass. But I noticed a secondary panel buried in the wall. Small, brushed steel, covered in dust. I pried that open and found a manual override. Keyed lock. The key wasn't there. I almost gave up. I stood, looked around the ruined shed, and thought maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe it was just an old storm shelter wired to look fancy. Then I remembered the ski patrol shack 100 yards uphill, the one used for emergency drills, first aid, and corporate training. I hiked there, broke in, and tore through every drawer. Bottom of a locked filing cabinet, wrapped in a sealed envelope, was a single key labeled Lift Station Override, Executive Only. I hiked back through knee-deep snow, breathing cold through a torn scarf, and slid the key into the lock. It turned. Not easy, like it hadn't been used in years, but it clicked, and the hatch released with a mechanical hiss. The floor shifted under me as something unlocked. I stepped back. The hatch creaked open and cold air rushed upward. Below was a clean steel ladder leading down into darkness. I turned on my headlamp and looked inside. No movement. No sound. The air smelled filtered. I climbed down. 12 feet. Then a landing. White walls. Recessed lights still glowing faint yellow. I stepped off the ladder and onto polished vinyl flooring. The hallway extended maybe 30 feet and ended in a thick sliding door with a biometric scanner. To my surprise, it opened. No fingerprint needed, just triggered by motion or proximity. Past it was a room the size of a basketball court. I saw long shelves, sealed crates, water tanks, and a workstation built into the wall. It was a private bunker, fully intact. Not just a panic room. This was a long-term survival vault. I spent the next 6 hours sweeping every inch of it. There were 4 living quarters, each with a bed, sink, toilet, and locking door. A kitchen with canned goods and freeze-dried packs stacked floor to ceiling. Solar charge converters wired into ceiling panels. Backup diesel generators. Air filtration. Temperature control. This place had everything. Toward the far side of the main hall, past the hydroponics area and a sealed cold storage room, I found another door. Thicker, with a reinforced frame and a mechanical lock instead of digital. The hinges looked clean. The door wasn't sealed like a panic hatch, but it hadn't been opened in a while either. I turned the knob slowly, flashlight raised. The hinges groaned just enough to spike my nerves. Inside was something that didn't belong underground. It looked like an office. Not a utility room or a shelter planner's nook, but an actual office. Walnut desk, mounted monitor, upholstered chair with lumbar mesh, framed photos on the back wall. There was a wide screen built into the far panel, probably for video conferencing or security feeds. The walls were covered in synthetic wood grain and acoustic foam. The floor had a custom rug. Everything was too clean. It didn't match the utility-first design of the rest of the bunker. I stepped in and shut the door behind me. It felt too personal to leave open. On the desk was a powered tablet resting on a magnetic charger base. I tapped it. The screen came on instantly. No lock screen, no password. The home screen had only one folder, labeled simply, Asset Briefings. I opened it and scrolled through the files. Most were just names and descriptions, logistics plans, site expansion reports, water efficiency breakdowns, employee rosters, vendor lists. I clicked one at random and scanned it. There were blueprints for something called Bunker 6A East Ridge, with an architectural logo in the corner and a signature, Martin P. Hale. I froze for a second. I knew that name. I'd seen it printed on the back of magazines and on the bottom of those glossy real estate signs posted all over the highway. Hale Realty, Hale Developments, Hale Investments. He was one of those TV billionaires who used to show up on financial news shows in a fleece vest talking about green innovation and climate resilience portfolios. My sister used to call him the doomsday investor because he always talked about future-proof architecture. Apparently, he future-proofed himself. The framed photos showed him younger, with a woman and 2 boys, probably his family. One of the kids was wearing ski goggles in every picture. I guess they had history on this mountain. I found a cabinet built into the left wall, opened it, and saw 3 sets of cold weather gear, thick, custom-made jackets, thermal-lined boots, gloves, everything monogrammed, all untouched. What grabbed my attention most wasn't the desk or the tablet, it was the safe. It was built into the wall behind a sliding wood panel. I only noticed it because the seam in the panel was a hair wider than the others. The safe had no visible handle, just a digital touchpad, flush with the surface. No brand, no make, just the blinking cursor waiting for a 6-digit code. I stared at it for a long time. I knew I didn't have the code, but something about it pulled at me. I guess that's human nature. When you're locked out of something, you obsess over it. I tried a few guesses. Year of the bunker blueprint, year on the ski photo, birthday from the calendar on the wall. After the 3rd failed attempt, the screen went dark and a red indicator lit up. Locked, next attempt in 24 hours. I stepped back and sat on the edge of the desk. It was stupid. I knew it was probably empty, or full of meaningless legal papers, or worse, something dangerous. But I kept thinking, if he was rich enough to build all this, what the hell did he feel the need to lock up even tighter? The thought stayed with me that night. I ended up crashing in one of the side quarters instead of returning to my cabin. I told myself it was for safety. The cold outside was dangerous. But really, I wanted to see more. I wanted to understand what kind of man builds something like this, and then disappears. The bed was firm, too clean, like a hotel room that hadn't been touched. I left the door cracked, kept my crowbar close, and dozed off. I woke up to lights dimming slightly. Automated night cycle. No alarms, no sounds. But something felt wrong. I got up, checked the main hallway, made a slow sweep. Nothing was moved, nothing missing. But the kitchen light was on. I had definitely turned it off. I made coffee using bottled water and freeze-dried grounds from a can marked 2029. It tasted stale but did the job. Day 2, in the bunker, I mapped everything out. I made a pencil sketch of the layout. Main hall, 4 rooms, kitchen, storage, hydroponics, office. I noticed a door near the utility corridor I hadn't opened yet. This one was labeled Operations Access Authorized Only. It had a thumbprint scanner. I didn't bother. Even if I got it open, I wasn't sure I wanted to mess with anything that said Operations. If the systems here failed, I didn't know enough to fix them. I wasn't a technician. I could rewire a chairlift or service a snowcat, but this was way out of my league. The 3rd day I spent inventorying the food. I took stock. Cans of chicken, chili, potatoes, corn, pallets of protein powder, vacuum-sealed fruit slices, water tablets. The labels had private manufacturing addresses, nothing commercial. Probably boutique suppliers used by survivalists. Some of it was past expiration, but the vacuum seals looked good. That evening, I opened the office again. I just stood in front of the safe for a while. I didn't try the code. I didn't want to waste an attempt. I searched the drawers for hints. No sticky notes. No notebook labeled passwords. Just legal pads with construction dates and contractor names. The more I read, the clearer it became. This bunker was just one of several. He had others, probably around the country, maybe around the world. This one just happened to be hidden under a ski slope I never left. That night I found the surveillance room. I didn't realize it at first. It looked like a standard electrical cabinet. But when I followed a bundle of coax cables through the ceiling tiles and into a corner closet, I found the feeds. Monitors built into the wall, most of them dark. 2 were still live. One showed the entrance ladder I came down through. The other was looking at a hallway, somewhere deeper in the mountain. I hadn't seen that space yet. It was another corridor, longer than any I'd walked. Concrete, bare walls, emergency lights every 20 feet. On the floor was a maintenance cart, the kind janitors use, with a tool bag slung across the handle. Behind it was a shape. It wasn't clear, not at first. The feed glitched, looped, then reset. I rewound. Most of the recordings were static, but that shape, it had moved. I stared at the monitor for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing changed. I checked the network logs on the terminal and saw that camera activity had spiked 2 days before I arrived. Someone had come through there. Someone, or something, had passed by that camera, paused, and then left the frame. The fact that the system was still recording meant power ran deeper than I realized. This place was larger than it looked. I locked the office after that. I dragged a steel bin in front of the door and jammed a wrench into the hinge gap. Then I turned every other light off in the bunker and waited in the dark. I sat near the main hallway with a thermal blanket and my back to the wall. The battery radio I'd brought from my cabin was dead. I hadn't heard another voice in over a month. I caught myself whispering to no one, just to hear something besides silence. On the 4th day, I tried the safe again. Different code this time. Maybe Hale's birth year, doubled. Nothing. Lockout message again. 3 attempts per day. After the 3rd failure, it wouldn't even let me touch the screen. I moved on. I started checking the sealed doors for signs of wear, any scuff marks or fingerprints. One of the living quarters, the second from the end, had hair in the drain. Not mine. Short, dark strands. Someone had used that shower recently. The bedding was tucked the way I'd left it, but the corner of the mattress had a dent I didn't remember making. The sink basin had a ring of moisture around the edge, like someone had poured water and leaned in close after washing up. The wastebasket was empty, but the lid had been lifted, then lowered without closing all the way. The top hung off by half an inch. None of it was proof. Not exactly, but I had lived alone long enough to notice when the smallest thing was off. I backed out, pulled the door shut behind me, and stood in the hall for a minute. That part of the bunker was colder than the rest. The airflow was weaker. I couldn't explain why. I moved to the end of the corridor and rechecked the final door, the only one that hadn't opened. There was no nameplate, no access panel, just a vertical seam in the wall and a rubber-sealed handle with a manual turn lock. I had tried it on my first day, and it hadn't budged, so I assumed it was storage or some kind of mechanical room. This time, it moved half an inch before resisting. Something metal scraped inside. I leaned my weight into it and felt the latch strain, then stop. Either it was locked from the other side or something had blocked it deliberately. I left it alone. I didn't want to announce myself by forcing doors open in a place where I didn't know what, or who, was on the other side. I went back to the surveillance cabinet and cycled through the few working feeds again. Still no movement. Still that same hallway, empty now, the cart gone. I checked for hidden folders, archived footage, motion alerts. Most logs had been deleted more than 2 weeks ago. The few that remained didn't show anything useful, just flickering lights and background electrical hum. I shut it down, not because I was done, but because I didn't want to stare at a screen and wait for it to show me someone I wasn't ready to meet. That night, I started sleeping in shifts, 3 hours at a time, with the doors latched and a radio set to trigger an alarm if the motion sensors in the main hall picked anything up. I also began keeping a record, not a journal, just time-stamped observations. Door opened, light left on. Air filter made noise at 3 o'clock. Strange whine in west duct. Sounded like a metal vibration. Possibly fan misalignment. But some part of me knew I wasn't logging maintenance issues. I was trying to track patterns, to see if anything moved when I wasn't looking. By the 5th day, I had opened the backup water treatment closet and found 2 empty water jugs lying on their sides. I hadn't touched this closet before. The last time I passed it, the door was latched shut with a zip tie. The tie was on the floor now, cut clean through. I found a knife blade snapped off beneath the mat. Utility blade. Rust on the edge, still sharp. I started talking aloud in the halls, nothing threatening, just short phrases. "Anybody here?" Or, "You hungry?" Or, "I'm not here to hurt you." I didn't expect a response. I was doing it more for myself. I figured if someone was hiding, they had probably been alone a lot longer than I had. I didn't want to make them think I was a threat, but I also didn't want to be caught unaware. I started walking louder, letting my boots hit the floor hard when I moved through the main areas, just so whoever was down here knew I wasn't creeping. That evening, I came back to the kitchen and found one of the cans I'd left out was gone. Not moved, gone. I had laid out 4 for sorting. 3 remained. No animals, no loose ventilation shafts. Only explanation was human. I checked the stock again. One of the MREs was torn open and half-eaten, then stuffed in the trash compactor chute. I knew it hadn't been there this morning. Whoever was moving around had gotten bolder. I decided to wait. I left the lights on low, pretended to head back to the sleeping quarters, and circled back quietly 10 minutes later. I crouched behind the hydroponic shelf, where I had a clear view of the pantry. I waited 2 hours, then 3. Finally, around the 4th hour, close to midnight, I heard movement. Barefoot, light padding steps. Whoever it was moved slowly, cautiously, but not with panic. They knew this place. They stepped out from the far corridor. He was thin, maybe in his early 20s, pale, hair cut short, messy, wearing one of the monogrammed jackets and thermal pants 2 sizes too large. No weapon in hand. He looked around carefully, then made a straight line for the shelf where the water jugs were stacked, grabbed one, turned, and paused like he sensed something. I stayed still. My legs started to cramp, but I held my breath. He didn't speak, didn't check the corners, just disappeared again into the hallway. I waited until morning, then I followed. Slowly, carefully, I retraced his steps. No traps, no barricades. The hallway he vanished into led to that locked door at the end of the hall, the one that scraped when I tried it. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I backed off. Later that day, I placed a bottle of water and a vacuum-sealed protein bar outside that door. I left a note. "Not here to hurt you. My name's Evan. I worked maintenance upstairs before the outbreak. I didn't know this place existed until a few days ago. If you want to talk, I'll be in the kitchen every night at 8. I didn't expect a reply, but I figured leaving something was better than doing nothing. On the 6th day, I woke up to find the note gone. The bottle still sat there, unopened. The food was gone too. In its place was another envelope. No handwriting, just a folded scrap of paper with coordinates scribbled in pencil. I punched them into the wall tablet. They pointed to another sublevel, something labeled Auxiliary Wing Maintenance Shaft 3B. I checked the layout map. There was no Shaft 3B on the standard print. The only way to reach it was through the operations access door I hadn't opened yet, the one with the thumbprint scanner. I made a decision then. I didn't trust the kid fully, but he clearly knew more about the place than I did. If he wanted me to find that shaft, maybe there was a reason. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe someone was trapped or hurt. Or maybe I was being led into a dead end. Either way, I couldn't sit in this place pretending I had it all under control. That night, I grabbed my crowbar, flashlight, and a spare breaker key, and returned to the operations door. I stared at the scanner. It was dead. I checked the wall panel beside it, and noticed a maintenance override tab, a recessed port I hadn't seen before. I jammed the breaker key in and twisted. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. I pulled the door open and immediately felt the air shift. It was colder, dry, stagnant. The corridor beyond was narrow, unfinished, and sloped downward. No lights, just dull emergency glow strips on the floor. I followed them, one step at a time, listening. I passed 2 sealed doors and a locked equipment locker. Then the passage widened into a small room with broken crates and collapsed ceiling panels. At the far end was a service elevator stuck halfway open. Inside was blood. Not fresh, dried, blackened, streaked up the side of the inner wall. Someone had been dragged, or tried to climb out before falling. I scanned the area. No bodies, no bones, just remnants. A jacket sleeve torn off, a radio battery, a small handprint smeared on the metal paneling. I turned back. I didn't want to linger in a part of the bunker no one had cleaned. Whatever happened here, it had been violent, and it wasn't logged in the files I'd found upstairs. Maybe Hale had more secrets than just a safe. I started compiling them now, mentally stacking each one like evidence. The extra doors, the silent kid, the hallway the cameras ignored, the elevator that hadn't worked in years. None of this was in the blueprints. Back in the main quarters, I sealed the operations corridor behind me and jammed the lock with a bolt from the kitchen shelf. I wasn't interested in sleeping after what I'd seen, so I went back to the surveillance monitors and checked the backup storage again. Still nothing recent. Whatever camera system this place used, it either had blind spots on purpose or someone had wiped the feed from certain areas before I got here. That didn't sit right with me. I opened the office again, shut the door behind me, and focused on the safe. I sat on the chair, leaned forward, and stared at the blinking light that said, "Ready, 3 attempts remaining." My hands hovered over the keypad. I wasn't going to guess. Not this time. I thought through everything I'd seen. Hale's photos, the schematics, the bunker folder structure, the embedded ID tags on the tablet. There were references to a fallback date, April 17th, 2032. That showed up on 3 different planning documents. Maybe it was a deadline. Maybe it was the activation date for the place. 6-digit code. I keyed in 041732. The light blinked, then held steady. A soft tone sounded. Nothing opened. Then the screen turned red and read, "Incorrect. 2 attempts remaining." I sat back and closed my eyes. It wasn't the right combination, but it wasn't random. That number meant something. I left the safe alone and went back to the kitchen to recheck the pantry shelves. I was looking for packaging dates, batch labels, anything with numbers. On a case of canned meat, I found a shipping label addressed to a logistics firm in Nevada. Under the priority code field was the number 110893. I don't know why it stood out. Maybe it looked familiar. Maybe it was the repetition of the digits. Maybe it was nothing. I went back to the office, entered it. Another failure. The safe buzzed louder this time. 1 attempt left for the day. I left it alone. I wasn't going to burn all 3 for nothing. That night, I left the note again by the locked door at the end of the corridor. I didn't include any questions. Just a short sentence. "Someone died in shaft 3B. Do you know who?" I folded the page, stuck it to the wall with tape, and waited. I spent the rest of the evening working in the hydroponic section, trying to regrow lettuce from a starter block. It gave me something to do with my hands. I kept the lights on. I didn't want to sit in the dark thinking about blood-streaked walls and elevators that never reached the top. Next morning, the note was gone again. Nothing in return this time. The door hadn't moved. No response. That kind of silence only made things worse. I couldn't figure out why the kid wouldn't talk. He had to know something. He was staying hidden on purpose. I started wondering if maybe there wasn't a second person after all. Maybe he had lived alone here for weeks. Maybe he was scared that if he spoke too much, someone worse than me might come. Around noon, I opened the water recycling system's side panel to check filtration pressure and found another surprise. Wedged in the drainage screen was a cloth scrap. Looked like it had been used to plug something. Grey, frayed, with red stitching on the edge. It didn't match any fabric from the bunk beds. Looked more like an outer garment. Jacket lining maybe. I pulled it free, and along with it came a chain of hair, fabric, and paper pulp, like someone had stuffed documents in there to destroy them and jammed the pipe. The pulp was soft, but one corner hadn't fully dissolved. I let it dry under the heat lamp in the kitchen and tried to read what was left. There were only 3 legible words on the fragment: Unit 2, Behavior, and Isolate. I didn't like that. I read it 3 times. Then I remembered the maintenance files. There were no references to individual people, only teams. Unit 1 was operations. Unit 2 wasn't listed. I went to the tablet, searched the drive for anything with behavior in the file name. One hit, a spreadsheet labeled Behavioral Monitoring Phase 3. I opened it, rows and columns, each cell color-coded. Most of them had no labels, just initials and numbers, but one entry had a red tag beside it. Subject K, 143, non-compliant, emotional volatility escalating, reassignment pending. I scrolled through the tabs. Phase 1, Phase 2, all empty. Phase 3 was the only one with data. It wasn't detailed, but it looked like someone had been keeping track of the residents' actions, maybe even their mental states. That wasn't in the brochure, I bet. I slept in the kitchen that night, lights on, crowbar under my blanket. The next morning, I opened the sealed cold storage unit to inventory what was still good. On the lower shelf, under a rack of vacuum-sealed meats, I found a satchel, military canvas, zip-tied shut. I cut it open and found a first aid kit, 2 morphine vials, bandages, and a badge. It was a real badge, plastic laminated, magnetic strip on the back. Anders H. Navarro Emergency Psychological Staff, Level 5 access. So they had a shrink on site. That meant they expected someone to break down. Or maybe someone already had. There were no signs of Navarro anywhere else in the files. No logs, no quarters assigned. I checked the bunk rooms again. One of the drawers had water damage inside. Looked like someone had hidden something there and pulled it out in a hurry. I started thinking maybe Navarro had gotten too close to something and ended up in the elevator shaft. I didn't touch the surveillance system for the rest of the day. It felt useless now. If someone could wipe logs or redirect feeds, then anything I saw on those screens could be manipulated. I shifted my attention to the ventilation system. I opened the central vent hub and traced airflow routes. Every quarter had adjustable valves, but one junction near the locked corridor vented into a lower chamber that didn't appear on the bunker schematic. I followed the duct as far as I could with a flashlight and mirror. I didn't see movement, but I did see blankets, folded, stacked neatly, hidden in the airshaft. That was how the kid moved around. He wasn't walking the halls anymore. He was living in the air system, using old access ladders and ductwork to reach different parts of the bunker. That explained the cold air shifts, the sudden missing items, the quiet footfalls that seemed to come from the walls. He'd been doing this a long time, probably before I even got here. He'd survived 30 days without making a sound. That took patience, or trauma. After a week of breathing recycled air and staring at concrete walls, I needed to get out. I wasn't built for this kind of stillness. I used to spend entire days in lift towers with wind screaming in my ears and snow under my boots. Being underground that long makes your thoughts slow and strange. I told myself I'd go outside just for a few hours, walk the ridge, breathe real air, maybe check the upper ski lodge for anything I missed before the bunker. I didn't expect anything useful, but I figured there might be old board games, magazines, something to kill time. I also wanted to grab something to coax the ductwork kid into talking. A deck of cards even, something human. I packed light, thermal jacket, 2 protein bars, a filtered canteen, flashlight, crowbar, and a flare gun I had stashed in the gear room. I took the mechanical emergency release key from the wall near the hatch ladder and looped it onto my belt with a carabiner. The hatch door couldn't be opened from the outside without that key. Last thing I wanted was to get locked out of the only place I knew was safe. Before I left, I made sure the kitchen door was unlatched and left a single note near the hydroponics bed. Out for a bit, back before night. I surfaced around 14 o'clock. The snow had started again. Nothing heavy, but the kind that builds fast. Sky was steel grey. Wind cut through the trees low and steady. I stuck to the service paths, most of them packed down from old plow trails. The upper lodge sat about 300 yards upslope, tucked behind a line of rock that cut it off from the view of the lower trail. The building was wide and blocky. It had the bones of a resort, the kind where people used to sit by fake fireplaces and order overpriced cocktails, all of it long abandoned. I circled the building twice before entering. All the lower windows were shattered, and snow drifted inside in low dunes. No fresh footprints, I moved slow, flashlight off, crowbar in one hand. The front lobby still had furniture, leather chairs, water damaged, magazines from 2 years ago fanned across a wooden coffee table. The place smelled like mildew and charred wood. Something had burned in the restaurant area. I found soot up the walls and a half-melted chandelier lying in the rubble. Whatever started it didn't spread far. Maybe a cooking fire gone wrong, or maybe someone torched it on purpose before fleeing. Upstairs, the guest rooms were mostly intact. Linens shredded, TVs missing, closets ransacked. I found a few unopened desk drawers with playing cards, puzzles, crossword books. I stuffed a few into my jacket. There was something comforting about the idea of sitting across from someone and just playing something simple. Cards don't need trust, just rules. I was about to leave when the snow thickened outside, the kind of whiteout you can feel before you see. Wind picked up, blowing sideways against the windows. I decided to wait it out. No sense getting lost or frozen 20 yards from shelter. I closed off the main hallway and used the restaurant's back corner, which had a view of the east slope. I sat under a blown-out skylight and watched flurries swirl through the rafters. It got quiet after that. Too quiet. The kind of still that makes your ears ring. Then, after dark, I heard it. Screaming. A woman. High-pitched. Ragged. It came from the slope beyond the front stairs, somewhere near the maintenance tramline. The scream cut off, then came again. Closer this time. I killed my flashlight, dropped behind the bar and waited. Something pounded up the stairs on the far side of the lodge. I heard broken glass scatter and wood creak. Then came another scream, this one almost right outside. I crawled low, moved to the side hall window, and looked down. A woman, barefoot, half-dressed, legs soaked in blood, was limping fast toward the building. Her hair was stuck to her face. She wore a torn parka, but it was hanging open. No gloves, no pants. Just a long thermal shirt hanging low over her thighs, stained dark at the hem. Behind her were 4 infected, then 6. They were fast. The cold didn't slow them like it used to. Must have been hiding inside somewhere warmer before chasing her out. I didn't think. I just moved. Down the hall, through the fire door, onto the balcony. She hadn't seen me. I cut across the side stairs, dropped 2 flights, and sprinted toward the secondary entrance near the gear room. She was almost at the door when I reached it from the inside. I threw it open, stepped out just far enough to wave her in, then shoved her sideways into the vestibule the second she passed the threshold. I slammed the door shut behind her and dropped the interior bar lock across it. The infected slammed into the outside a second later, rattling the whole frame. I turned to check on her, but before I could speak, she kicked me hard, straight into my left leg. My knee buckled, and I hit the tile floor, crowbar sliding out of reach. She backed up against the wall, breathing hard, lamp in hand. One of those old gas-powered camp lanterns, dented, bloody. She raised it with both hands like she was about to bring it down on my face. "Wait," I said, hand up. "I pulled you in. I locked the door. You were about to get torn up." She didn't lower the lantern. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. She was shaking, jaw tight. I could tell she was still in fight or flight, barely tracking words. I stayed down, didn't move. "You would have been dead," I said again. "Check the lock." After a long second, she lowered the lantern. Not all the way, just enough to stop looking like she was about to crush my skull. Then she slumped down onto the floor opposite me and pulled her bloody leg in with a hiss of pain. I sat up, rubbed my knee. It throbbed like hell but wasn't broken. "I didn't know if you were one of them," she said. Her voice was hoarse, dry. "I get that." Her name was Sophia. She'd been part of a survival group that holed up in the lower cable terminal until 2 days ago. Said they'd made it through most of the month before someone in their group started losing it, talking to dead people, locking doors behind them, hiding food. Eventually the infected found them. She got separated. Said she'd been running almost non-stop for the last 24 hours. The wound on her leg looked deep but not infected. She needed rest and antibiotics. I had both. but they were down in the bunker. I asked if she could walk. She nodded but didn't move, just leaned back and winced. I wrapped the gash in cloth torn from a table runner. It was crude, but it slowed the bleeding. I didn't tell her yet about the hatch. I didn't know if I could trust her. Not fully. But I couldn't leave her here either. So I helped her to her feet, shouldered her weight, and we made our way slowly back toward the far wing of the lodge. I found an old cot in the manager's office and lowered her onto it. She didn't trust me, and I didn't blame her. I didn't fully trust her either. That kind of mistrust was natural now, reflexive. We hadn't lived in a safe world for over a month. People had started turning on each other before the dead even took over. She didn't ask questions when I blocked the office door with a filing cabinet and a broken chair. She watched every movement I made until her eyelids finally gave out and she passed out from sheer exhaustion. Not sleep, just shutdown. That was the only time she let her guard down, and even then her body tensed every time the wind howled outside the cracked windows. I didn't sleep that night. I sat near the far wall, crowbar across my lap, and listened. The infected outside never tried to breach the building again, but I could hear them sometimes. Scraping, sniffing, stumbling through snowdrifts. One of them must have circled back. Around 4 in the morning, something heavy slammed against a wall 2 rooms over. It didn't come closer. It just pounded once, and then moved off again. Quiet except for the occasional thump of half-frozen limbs dragging across tile. When the light finally broke through the grey sky and spilled across the cracked ceiling, she stirred. Her legs twitched first, then her fingers tightened around the edge of the cot. She sat up fast, scanning the room like she expected to be handcuffed or worse. Her breathing didn't slow until she spotted me, still in the chair near the corner, shuffling a deck of cards. I didn't say anything, just held up a silver foil food pack and a half-liter of bottled water. She took them slowly, read the label, sniffed the seal. It said, shelf meal, 14 spiced lentils and rice, and had no expiration date. She peeled it open, hesitated, then ate. No utensils, just scooped it with her fingers. I gave her a cloth napkin and another pack with a protein bar inside. She didn't thank me, but I wasn't expecting gratitude. Just seeing her eat without lashing out was enough. I'm not sick, she said quietly, still chewing. That's good, I replied calmly. Would have been wrong not to. I slid the deck of cards across the floor toward her. Besides, you kicked the hell out of my leg. That's gotta count for something. She didn't smile, but something behind her eyes softened. She picked up the cards, looked at the front one, and flipped through them once. Her hands were shaking less now. Color was starting to return to her face. I watched her move and noted the wound again. No sign of rot, no skin discoloration, just bruising and raw muscle. I figured she had maybe 2 days before infection risk from the injury. Not the virus, just standard wound care. If I didn't get her to antibiotics soon, she might lose the leg. Do you want to tell me what happened? I asked. Back there? How you ended up out like that? She hesitated, looked down at the floor, then nodded slowly. I was with a group, 7 of us. Started as 13, but we lost people fast. 2 on the first night when a propane tank blew. The rest split or got caught trying to get food. We found a tram station off the lower slope that still had power. Not much, just lights and heat. We thought it'd be safe. Was it? She shook her head. Not for long. One of the guys, Jonah, got bit 2 days before the collapse. He didn't tell anyone. Said he got scratched by a fence. Then, the night before the attack, he got weird. Wanted to feel human again, he said. Started coming at me while I was trying to sleep. Said it didn't matter anymore, that he was dead anyway. I fought him off, broke his nose, ran. She stopped there. I didn't say anything, just sat still. Let her sit with the weight of that memory. Her hands were clenched tight. Her shoulders were bunched like she was still in that moment. You got away, I said. You survived. Barely. I knelt beside the cot and gestured to her leg. Let me look at it properly. I've got some real medical supplies stashed, better than torn tablecloths. She watched me carefully, then nodded once and extended her leg. I cut the fabric around the wound and peeled it back. The gash was swollen and deep, but there was no streaking or black around the edge. I flushed it with clean water and sealed it with sterile gauze from my vest. Her eyes stayed on mine the whole time, tracking every move. I didn't try to joke. I didn't say anything comforting. I just worked until it was done, then stepped back. She asked me about where I came from. I told her the truth. About the ski lifts, the maintenance job, the cabins I scavenged after the resort emptied out. I told her about the lodge fire, the cold, and the old workshop where I first found the hidden hatch. I told her I was alone from the start and hadn't spoken to anyone else since the outbreak. She asked about the food, where I got it. I said I had a stash left over from early pandemic panics. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. I didn't mention the bunker, not yet. Over the next 2 days, we stayed in the lodge. It wasn't safe, not in the long term, but it gave us shelter. I reinforced the second-floor hallway with furniture and a ski rack lashed to the doorframe using old bootstraps. The snow outside had built up against the south windows, thick enough to seal out wind but not cold. We set up camp in the manager's office, the only room with thick walls and no exterior access. There was no power left in the building, so I scrounged fuel from the maintenance shed, half a jug of treated diesel, and used a cracked camping burner to boil snow in metal serving trays pulled from the kitchen. The burner barely worked, but it gave off heat, enough to warm our hands. At night, we wrapped ourselves in layered curtains and stripped linens from every room we could reach. I made a sleeping area by pushing 2 chairs together and laying them flat with a mattress pad over the top. Sophia used the cot, her leg elevated on a luggage bag. I cleared 2 floors while she rested, killed 3 infected during sweeps. One was hiding inside the old walk-in freezer behind the kitchen. The door had been wedged open by a broken shelf, and I thought it was empty. It wasn't. I didn't even see the thing until it lunged at me from behind a stack of plastic bins. I drove my crowbar into the side of its neck and used the body to block the door afterward. The second was still frozen in place behind the ski rental counter. It was upright, eyes open, not moving, but its fingers twitched when I got close. I put a spike through the eye just to be sure. The third came at us while I was helping Sophia down the back stairwell. Her weight was heavy on my shoulder, and I didn't see it until we rounded the landing. It let out that awful broken sound and came full speed. Sophia slipped. I caught her, then shoved the thing off balance and jammed my crowbar into its chest. It didn't stop. I dragged us both backward and kicked it through the half-open elevator shaft just before it reached us. It hit metal 2 stories down and didn't make a sound after. After that, I dragged an old vending machine into place across the side corridor. Took me over an hour with a broken dolly and frozen wheels. It wasn't just to block the hallway. I needed something that would make noise if anything came through at night. We couldn't afford another close call. I ripped curtains into strips and used them as draft blockers, hung extra fabric over the inside doors to keep the heat from bleeding out. We huddled near the burner for warmth and burned napkins for kindling when we ran out of matches. Sophia's leg was healing, but slow. The wound stayed closed thanks to the gauze and ointment I had, but she was stiff every morning. She did her best not to show how bad it hurt. When she walked, she gritted her teeth and gripped the wall without saying anything. I offered her my shoulder, and she only took it when she absolutely had to. There was no spare strength in her. It was all survival now. In the downtime, we talked in small pieces. She asked what I did for fun before all this. I said I didn't do much. Just worked, drank on weekends, played poker when someone at the depot organized a game. She smiled and said, "Not much of a story, huh?" I told her she hadn't heard the worst of it yet. She laughed once, then winced from her stitches. She told me a little about her brother. He was younger, worked in IT, had a collection of retro video games, and always tried to make her laugh during family dinners, even when things were going bad. He didn't make it. She didn't say how he died, just said his name, Jonas, and that he always wanted to visit Colorado, but never made time. By the end of the second day, the heat was going out again. The burner fuel was down to fumes. The cloth insulation barely held warmth, and the glass in the window panes had started to rattle again with wind. I knew we couldn't make it another night without proper shelter. Her body was still weak, and mine wasn't far behind. The silence in the halls started to get heavier. I kept thinking I was hearing footsteps, or breath, just on the other side of the stairwell. But nothing ever came. That night, while we sat on the floor near the burner eating the last of the warm shelf meals, she looked up from her tray and said, "You never said where you sleep." I didn't answer at first, just stared at the flickering burner flame, trying to decide whether to say it. Then I stood, pulled the emergency key out of the inside pocket of my jacket, and laid it flat on the table next to her meal. "I've got a place," I said. "A real one. Safe, warm, stocked. It's hidden. I didn't tell you before because I wasn't sure what this was. If I could trust you. But you need a real bed, a real heater, antibiotics. I've got all of it." She stared at the key for a long time before speaking. "And you just never said anything?" "I didn't know if you'd believe me, or if you'd take it from me and leave me here. People are different now." She stared at the key, then back at me. "It's real? It's warmer than this dump, and there's soap." We packed what we could. She wore one of the spare jackets I found earlier, tied shut with a belt from the lost and found bin. I helped her walk. We took the side trail through the tree line and circled wide around where I'd seen the infected last. No sign of them now, just snow, half-melted footprints, and wind carrying everything else away. We reached the hatch before noon. I unlocked it, swung it open, and she paused at the edge, looked down into the dark. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "We both need some place that doesn't want to eat us." She climbed down first, slow and careful. I followed after sealing the hatch. For the first time in days, I didn't feel the cold on my face. The bunker's warmth felt artificial, sure, but it was real enough to take the edge off everything we had just gone through. Sophia stood at the bottom of the ladder for a long time, turning in a slow circle, taking it all in. The recessed lights, the polished floor, the sealed crates, the quiet. It was the kind of silence most people wouldn't have known how to handle before all this. But now it was like a blanket pulled over a wound. I showed her the main corridor first, then the kitchen, then the sleeping quarters. She didn't say much at first, just nodded, running her fingers along the walls, checking corners, double-taking at the food shelves and clean water jugs. I gave her one of the untouched rooms. She didn't ask why it looked like no one had ever used it. I didn't explain. I let her explore it at her own pace, gave her clean towels, antibiotic ointment, and bandages from the sealed first aid locker. After she changed clothes and scrubbed the dried blood from her arms, I heated another shelf meal and set it on the table. We ate in silence that night. She barely touched the rice, but she drank a full bottle of water and then curled up in the lounge chair like she'd lived there her whole life. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the closest either of us had come to it in 31 days. The next morning, she asked what the catch was. "Places like this don't just sit empty," she said. "Somebody always comes back." "There was someone else," I told her. "Or there still is. I'm not sure." She laughed. Thought I was joking. I wasn't. I explained about the notes, the missing food, the air ducts, the second shower being used. She got quiet then, said she never saw anyone else when she first arrived, but admitted she'd heard scratching once while resting near the kitchen the night before. I showed her the narrow shaft where I found the blanket pile, the small torn-up scrap of cloth in the drain filter, the hallway camera that still blinked on and off like it was being tampered with. I even showed her the safe in the office and how I'd never been able to open it, until the day I found it already unlocked and empty. No trace of who had been inside or why they left it that way. Sophia didn't ask any more after that. She just started leaving her own small notes next to mine at the hydroponic shelf. Another week passed. No replies, just silence, same as before. I spent my time checking systems, running inventory, and finally figuring out how to bypass the camera loops by hardwiring around the faulty switchboard. No new footage ever showed. The same empty hallway, the same quiet rooms. Whoever had been moving in the walls either moved on or learned how to disappear better. Sophia took over the hydroponics bed, said growing things made her feel like the world still worked. I told her about the time a ski patrol officer fell asleep on a lift control panel and left guests stranded for 3 hours in freezing wind. She told me about her younger brother, how he used to take apart her bike just to see if she'd ask for help putting it back together. We talked at night while sorting supplies or playing cards. Not heavy stuff, just enough to keep the hours full. Some days I thought about the safe again, about the kid who may or may not still be crawling through the vents, reading our notes and stealing snacks. Sometimes I caught Sophia looking at the corner ducts too. Neither of us said anything about it after a while. It just became part of the place, like the low hum of filtered air or the soft click of motion-activated lights. One morning, she came into the kitchen limping less than usual and asked if I thought it would ever go back. Anything. The power, the country, the people who ran things. I told her honestly I didn't know. But if it didn't, at least we weren't dead yet. She nodded and went back to prepping a set of grow trays with lettuce seeds. We had enough food to last another few months, maybe more if we were careful. The solar panels on the ridge still pulled charge through the overcast. The air was clean, the water tanks were full, and the dead hadn't found the hatch. Not yet. I kept writing notes, just small ones, updates, questions, sometimes dumb jokes. Favorite shelf meal, rank worst to not worst. Or, does anyone else hear that hum at 3 o'clock or am I going crazy? I stacked them in the hydroponic nook, but whoever had been crawling through the ducts stopped taking them, or stopped existing. I stopped checking every hour, but I still left new ones every few days, just in case. Sophia turned the bunker's plant bed into a little jungle. She scrounged through the crates and pieced together a homemade trellis with snapped mop handles and cut zip ties. The lettuce grew fast. So did the beans. One afternoon she danced around the grow lights because a tomato sprout had broken through the starter sponge. "We can make pasta sauce in 5 years," she said. I pretended to mark it on the calendar. She named the plants like they were pets. Basil was Tiny Greg. The cucumber starter was Elena. The tomato? Vice President Tomato. No idea why, but it stuck. I didn't say anything when she drew little cartoon faces on the pots. It made her laugh, and laughter down here mattered more than the rules about not wasting markers. On day 57, I fixed the south corridor vent grill. It had been rattling for weeks, and it finally shook loose in the middle of the night. I thought someone, or something, was crawling through again. Sophia had her crowbar in hand before I was even off the cot. We cleared the hall together, checked every crawl space, every hatch. Nothing but wind through the shaft. I tightened the bolts and put up insulation foam. She left another note in the vent afterward. "Still here, still breathing. Hope you are too." By day 62, her leg was healing well enough that she could walk unassisted, though she still kept the cane I carved her out of an old bunk post. She never thanked me for it, but I'd catch her tracing the groove I left in the handle with her thumb. It helped her get to the north end of the facility without needing rest breaks. She started taking solo walks just to feel like herself again. I understood that. Being watched, even by someone trying to help, gets old fast. We gave each other space when we needed it. One night, I found her asleep in the office chair, safe open behind her. She was thumbing through old printed dossiers from the asset folder I'd ignored before. Nothing critical, just files Hale must have used when this place was active. Staff rotations, logistics, maybe psychological reports. She'd pulled one page and set it aside. It had only a few lines on it. Unit 2, Behavioral Test Pool, Priority 3A Survivors, Limited Reproductive Viability. Final observation window ends April 17th. We didn't talk about it. She folded it up and burned it in the kitchenette sink the next day. We stopped asking questions about the previous residents. Whoever else lived here once, if they left, if they turned, if they were still somewhere in the dark. We figured they either didn't want company or didn't need it anymore. Day 70. A battery in one of the surface sensors pinged an alert. Motion. Just one ping, then silence. Could have been wind. Could have been wildlife. Could have been someone trying to find shelter before the next storm rolled in. We argued about going topside. I wanted to check it. She didn't. Said if someone needed help, they would have made more noise. But I went anyway. Nothing. Just frost, snow, and a bent pine sapling near the panel tower. I replaced the battery, checked the recording unit. Empty. Sophia was right. I came back down covered in ice and said nothing about it. Later that night, she brought over the old box of VHS tapes we found in the storage crates. Training videos, documentaries, a few weird bootlegs with handwritten labels. She rigged a player from one of the wall consoles and made popcorn out of vacuum-packed kernels in a bent mess tin over a heating coil. We watched an old ski safety tutorial with music that sounded like it had been composed on a calculator. I hadn't laughed that hard in years. It wasn't even the tape, it was her commentary. She mocked the narrator's voice, acted out every fall, and snorted when the actor faked a twisted ankle. She said, "At least he had poles." We both cracked up for 5 minutes straight. Day 74. I woke up before her. She left a note stuck to my water bottle with electrical tape. Happy 74. Still breathing. Still eating. Still a bit suspicious of you. But you grow on people. Like algae. That day, we cleaned the bunker's hallways together. Picked up all the clutter we'd let build up in the corners. Realized we'd made a mess in our little haven. So we swept, sorted, organized. After dinner, we sat in the lounge and talked about things that had nothing to do with the outbreak. She asked what my first job was. I told her I used to assemble furniture at a warehouse store. She told me she once lied on a resume and somehow ended up managing a garden center she didn't understand for 4 months. We swapped stories until the lights dimmed to their auto sleep setting. No one came knocking. No one stormed the hatch. No one sent a rescue party. But we were still here. Still alive. Still human. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you. What moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership. Carlos Herrera, The Great Anywho, Jadala, Madam Midnight, Deborah Powell, William Blackwell. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.